about to listen to the very first episode of this podcast, back when the podcast was named Let's Talk About Stress. In this, I share my personal experience of burnout and what motivated me to create this podcast in the first place. So I hope you enjoy it. It's nearly 10 years since my burnout experience, and I believe that it wasn't necessary for me to burn out, and it's not necessary for you either. In this podcast, my guests and I share our real-life experiences with burnout. We get into the science of stress and share actionable tips on how to prevent burnout and how to recover from it. I'm Hannah Holden, ex-management consultant and burnout survivor. I work with management consultants to help them avoid and overcome burnout. I help them to get intentional about their choices, rebuild their energy, and embed new healthy habits so that they can get back to loving life. I want to talk to you today about how I came to be here talking to you about stress, so some of my own personal experiences and what's led me to this place. But first, I wanted to set some expectations and talk about what this podcast is about. So really what I want the podcast to help with is to help normalise conversations about stress. Too often, I think that people go through stressful periods in their life behind closed doors. They do it privately. Perhaps we all see it as a sign of weakness, and so we don't want to be seen to be weak. Perhaps it's just that it's difficult to describe what we're stressed about or why it is that we're experiencing the level of anxiety we are about something that perhaps on paper or in our minds doesn't seem such a big deal, but emotionally it feels like a really big deal. But either way, I think that too many people suffer in silence or behind closed doors. And what I want this podcast to do is just help us all normalize this conversation. And so to help you maybe share an episode with a friend and say, this was really interesting. Do you want to have a chat about this? I think it would be relevant, or, just to help open some doors and make it more possible to have conversations on this topic. So that's what I want to do, and I'm going to do that by sharing experiences. So I'm happy to share my own real life experiences, and we'll start with some of that today. I'm also going to have guests on sharing their personal experiences, and some of them will work in a professional capacity with individuals who are experiencing stress, and I want to get insights from them on more generally what do they see with their client base. So we're going to go from very specific personal stories through to what we're generally seeing in the population. So those are the things that I'm going to be sharing. I also want you to always take away something actionable from each of these episodes. I want you to take away, maybe it's something to do, something to try. Some of these might be journaling suggestions, some of them might be breath practices or meditation practices. And who knows what guests of mine will share in future in terms of their tips and techniques. But I do want within each of these episodes you to have something that you can go and play with at home. And I also want them to be bite-sized. I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to embark on this enormous podcast. I want it to feel really easy to listen to. So I aim for these episodes to be about 20 minutes each, so that you can, put your boots on, go out for a walk and think, yeah, I can listen to this. It's only going to be 20 minutes long. So that's the plan. And here we are, starting with today. So let's go back to where did this all begin, and how is it that I am now here recording a podcast episode for you about stress. It's really difficult to kind of pinpoint where anything begins. Do I take, where do I start with my story? Where does this story begin? And I think let's just start right back at the bottom of my journey, but that's not necessarily the beginning of my journey, because there were certainly things that contributed to me finding myself at rock bottom. So what did rock bottom look like for me? It looked like being very alone, and part of that was created by myself, in that I just really didn't understand what I was experiencing, so I didn't know how to verbalize it. I didn't know how to have a conversation with somebody else about how I was feeling. The level of emotion that I was feeling appeared very disproportionate to the factual events of my life. So I found it very difficult to say how terrible I felt when on the surface of it everything looked so rosy. Um, I was very successful in my career. I was earning good money. I was getting fantastic feedback from clients and from colleagues. I was in a consultancy. Um, I was making pitches of like multi-million pound programs to clients, and they were being successful. So yeah, I was doing great, and you know, to highlight that, I even won an award only a few months before really hitting rock bottom. And yeah, I had a paid first class trip to Barbados, which was absolutely amazing, but didn't really do very much about the constant, consistent pressure that I felt, and the sense of being alone that I felt, and yeah, just feeling really confused and overwhelmed. So yeah, I know that I couldn't verbalize what was going on for me, and so I ended up being alone on my kitchen floor, crying for I have no idea how long I was there for. Don't feel too sorry for me. The kitchen floor in our house does have underfloor heating, so it wasn't such a bad place to be. But yeah, I didn't know what else to do. I'd run out of steam to carry on carrying on and keeping up appearances. Um, I really had lost contact with myself, with who I was. I really didn't know how to be happy again. I didn't know how to tap into the person that I was many years ago. Um, I had attempted things like, okay, well, what did I used to do when I was younger? What did I used to do to pass the time as hobbies? And can I just somehow tap into that sense of creativity that I felt? I really craved that sense of creativity. I really wanted to be back in that space where, yeah, there was a weight lifted off my shoulders and I could be creative. So when I was younger, I did used to take myself off and play with watercolors. So I attempted that, and I found myself staring at this blank page. I couldn't bring the paintbrush to the paper. I didn't know where to start. I couldn't imagine a picture that I was trying to create. I just had nothing. And I just stared at this empty page, and I had nothing to give to this empty page. There was nothing there. And so I felt like I'd lost myself and I felt like I didn't know how to find myself again. The answers weren't obvious to me. There are a number of ways that we can process and release stress, and crying is certainly not the first suggestion that I would come up with, but it's very effective. I'd suggest it's more kind of the last thing that we could do to discharge stress, but certainly I had fully discharged all of that after, like I said, I don't know how long I was on the floor for crying. And in that sort of emerged this clarity and a sense of, all right, I'm here on the floor and I'm on my own, and nobody's about to come charging through here like a knight in shining armour to rescue me. And so it's down to me, and I need to make some decisions, and they need to be big decisions. And I need to decide if this is what I want or if I'm going to change. And if I'm going to change things, then how am I going to commit to that? How am I going to know what direction that change should go in? And how am I going to make sure that I stay motivated and consistent, and that I don't just decide today that I'm going to do something differently and then tomorrow carry on as usual? How am I going to make this lasting? So there, in this kind of messy heap on the kitchen floor, I found myself doing some serious soul searching and being quite strategic about it. You know, what's the goal here? What will motivate me? What's my why? And I don't mean that in the way that Simon Sinek talks about why, but like, what is my motivation to get myself up off this floor and make sure that I don't find myself in this mess again? What is it that ultimately is the most important thing to me right now in my life? Is it my career? Is there a goal within my career that I'm going to aim at and I'm going to do everything for? Is that what will fulfill me? Or is it something else? And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that it was having a family, and that was the thing that was most important to me. And I think I'd been struggling with these conflicting priorities because I had already known that that was important to me, but you can't just suddenly decide, right, we're going to have kids and it's just suddenly going to happen. So this conflict had been there where I had been continuing to work, and in many ways that was actually counterproductive if my overall goal was to become pregnant. Spending all these hours on work was probably not the right thing to be doing. So yeah, I had struggled with these conflicting priorities and what was important to me, and what do you do when, if we say that becoming pregnant is my number one goal, then does this mean I need to give up my job? Does it mean that this job is the wrong one for me, but perhaps this career is still right for me, etc.? So there was a lot of, I think it was, the level of anxiety, the level of exhaustion I'd got myself to was in part because I just couldn't see how all of these jigsaw pieces were fitting together. And frankly, they weren't. But that's the conclusion I came to, that it's this desire to be a mother that is going to get me out of this. And I commit to doing the best I can every day towards that goal. And what does that look like? It means showing up for myself. It means self-care. Because I'm not going to be able to care for anybody else unless I'm looking after myself. So I need to commit to my own self-care. And what does that look like? So I kind of doubled down on my commitment to yoga. I already dabbled in yoga at the time. I doubled down in that. And the story kind of emerges from there, where I was practicing meditation more. Again, I had already done meditation courses prior to this. Many years prior to me finding myself on the kitchen floor. So these were options that I already had within my grasp, within my reach, but I wasn't putting them to practice on a daily basis. And so I started to double down on all of that, and I was able to show up for myself because it was easier having made a commitment to this human being that didn't exist yet, this future child. I was able to commit to her and say, I'm going to show up for myself, for you every day. And I found it far easier to make that commitment with her in mind than I did with myself in mind. Because frankly, I wasn't looking after myself, and I'm not sure I cared that much for myself. But suddenly this gave me a new perspective. I was clearer on my ultimate motivation, and I was able to show up and do something on behalf of somebody else, because it's amazing what we'll do for others that we won't do for ourselves. And so, so that moment or those many hours of being on the kitchen floor and going through the experience that I've just described was my rock bottom. And I'm sure that others have had similar experiences, maybe rock bottoms that look even worse than that. But it was also a turning point because of that soul searching that I did, the commitments that I made to myself, the decisions I made. It's not like I went back into work and quit the next day. The external change was a lot slower than that, but the internal change happened there and then on the floor when I made those decisions and made those commitments to myself. So since then, I decided to work a 4-day week. I completely, over the years after that, I changed how I was working. I changed the type of work I was doing. And then years later, I found myself back in another consultancy, having really struggled with the idea of being in a consultancy because I just was really nervous about the whole business model. You know, they sell people's time. People are the commodity that consultancies work in. So they can be quite, I don't want to go as far as to say dehumanizing, but they are very challenging environments to work in. So I was really not sure about whether or not that was a sensible idea, but I did it. And I did it with the intention of showing that it doesn't need to be that way. And I wanted to work in an organization that believed in people, that invested in people, where my values were aligned with the organization's values, and we could really care about the people within our care. And so I went back into consulting and found myself in a management position with a team, and COVID hit, and wow, did life get busy and crazy. But by that point, my yoga and meditation practice was a daily commitment for me. So I would get up at the crack of dawn every day and I would practice. And that would make sure that I had a full cup to support people throughout the day, whether they be my clients or my team. And I was able to show up and share from a full cup with them day in, day out. It was exhausting. I'm not saying that it was easy. And some days I would have very little left by the end of the day. But that's how I was able to show up for myself and for them through that process. And my gosh, getting through those lockdowns was tough. By that point, our daughter was at school, and so we were even homeschooling for some of it. It was crazy. But I know that I was able to come out the other side of it because of my yoga and my meditation practice. And I see yoga, and when I say yoga, I mean it in the broadest possible sense. In the West, we've got this kind of very exercise-based view of yoga, which involves, stretchiness and, the strength to be in a handstand and the stretchiness to get into the splits. And that's not, for me, what yoga is all about. Yoga is far bigger than that. Yes, there is an element of physical movement to it, but it's about the mindfulness. It's about getting to know yourself better. And there are so many tips and techniques in there, and things that I know that others refer to as life hacks. Like some of these breath practices, you wonder why they're not taught to us all in primary school, because they're so effective at shifting the state of our nervous system. So yeah, I see yoga as just this huge treasure trove of tips and techniques and tricks and life hacks. And that's what I want to share. So I've spent years dabbling and exploring all of that, and now I really believe that my job in life is to break that down and try and break down as many barriers as I possibly can for other people to be able to get access to that. So if you're thinking, oh my God, I can't do yoga because that involves lycra, it involves mirrors, it involves the splits, etc. No, none of that. It involves really accessible tips and techniques that very quickly shift your mindset, shift your mood, shift the way that your nervous system is responding. And so that's really what I'm all about now. And hopefully it makes sense how this podcast is coming into being, why I want to do this, and how I want to help people with these conversations and with these tips and techniques that you can use in managing your stress levels. So I think we are pretty much at a wrap, but I did promise you that we would have something actionable. And I've been torn as to what I should give you for today, because for the most part, I think I'll be giving you breath practices and meditations. But today I wanted to start by suggesting that you journal. And the term journal, just like, let's break that down as well. Let's throw that term out the window. Can you pick up a pen and paper and just write some stuff? And it doesn't need to make any sense, and you don't need to, frame it and keep it forever. In fact, set fire to it if you want to. But can you just think about what listening to me today has brought up for you? What's resonated for you? Or what have you heard me say and that's elicited an emotional response, whether that be sadness or anger or whatever? What is this bringing up for you? And are there decisions that you could be making to make this a turning point in your life? You don't need to hit rock bottom. You don't need to go and cry on the kitchen floor to make a decision that could be a turning point for you. Are you at a place where you need a turning point? What is it that you need to change? How do you need to prioritize what you do and where you spend your energy? Yeah, so I'd really like to invite you to, at some point, pick up a pen and paper and just pour out some nonsense, if you want, onto this paper of any random thoughts around this. And some of it will not be nonsense, even if you start with, oh my gosh, Hannah asked me to write some stuff and I don't even know what to start with. That's fine to start writing that. But yeah, something in there, you'll get some gems. See where you are, tap into yourself and see if there's anything, really what can you take away from this conversation that we've had today. And I realised that I've now got to the end of my 20 minutes and I haven't actually introduced myself. So I am Hannah Holden, and it is an absolute pleasure to be working with you. Welcome to my brand new podcast, Let's Talk About Stress, and we will pick this up where we left off next time. Thank you so much for listening. These podcasts are here to help you manage your stress and burnout, and your feedback is really valuable. So please rate this podcast and also drop me a note with any questions, suggestions, or feedback that you might have. One of the most common questions I get asked is, where should I start? And I believe that the best place for you to start is to learn how to soothe your nervous system. I've created a free download with instructions for 5 different ways that you can do just this, and all of them work pretty much instantly. It's called the Essential Toolkit for Management Consultants. You can download it now at www.hannahholden.co.uk/essential. One last thing, it's the legal language. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your doctor, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional.